On this date in 1692, Massachusetts sent Captain James Converse and Captain Enoch Greenleaf with soldiers to York, Maine, and they also sent Major Elisha Hutchinson to Maine to take command of the English colonial forces there. He was ordered to establish a regional communication system to try to prevent surprise attacks by the French and Wabanaki Confederacy enemies. And Major Hutchinson was accompanied by three of the judges who would sit on the court of Orion Terminer. They went as far as the ferry out of Boston with him. Waitstill Winthrop, William Stoughton, and Samuel Sewell. And they were joined by Isaac Addington, who would soon be appointed Secretary of the Province of Massachusetts Bay. So he had quite an escort just to get to the ferry. Welcome to Salem Witch Trials Daily. I'm Josh Hutchinson.
I'm Sarah Jack. Today we're looking at a crucial, yet often overlooked element of the Salem witch trials, the influence of the New England frontier. Specifically, we're talking about Maine and New Hampshire.
When we think of the 1692 witch hunt, we typically picture the farms of Salem Village or the crowded courtrooms in Salem town. But to truly understand the widespread panic, we have to look north to the wilderness.
The northern frontier was engulfed in brutal conflicts, including King William's War. The ongoing trauma from attacks by the Wabanaki Confederacy and French forces created a deep, pervasive fear among English colonists.
Historian Mary Beth Norton and others have pointed out that this frontier war directly fed into the Salem crisis. Refugees fleeing the violence in Maine poured south into Essex County, Massachusetts, bringing their trauma and a desperate siege mentality with them.
Afflicted girl Mercy Lewis is a prime example. She had lived on the Maine frontier and was orphaned after witnessing brutal attacks that devastated her family and killed them. The severe PTSD she carried from the frontier certainly fueled her terrifying afflictions and subsequent accusations in the courtroom.
And Mercy Lewis wasn't the only one with deep ties to Maine. Before moving to the Putnam household in Salem, Mercy actually worked as a servant for George Burroughs in Maine.
Burroughs is a fascinating and tragic figure. He was the former minister of Salem Village, but had relocated to a settlement at Casco, what is today Portland, Maine. After the Wabanaki Confederacy wiped out that settlement, he moved further south to Wells, Maine. In 1692, the Salem accusers named him as the ringleader of the witches. He was apprehended in Wells and dragged all the way to Massachusetts to face trial and ultimately execution.
There was a very real belief among Puritans that the devil resided in these northern woods. Take Abigail Hobbs, a Topsfield teenager accused of witchcraft. She had lived previously in Maine, and she confessed that she had been made a witch at the Eastward, which was the colonial term for Maine, and claimed she had physically met the devil who came to her as a black dog in the woods there.
The anxiety wasn't limited to the physical threat of war. The psychological fear of the frontier extended into New Hampshire, too. Historians often describe New Hampshire as an outlier compared to the rest of New England. It was less strictly Puritan, but it still saw its share of witchcraft accusations.
The political instability of the era played a huge role. Around 1679 and 1680, New Hampshire officially separated from Massachusetts to become a royal colony. And that political uncertainty coincided with the mini outbreak of witchcraft accusations in the town of Hampton.
The first woman accused of witchcraft in New Hampshire was Jane Walford of Portsmouth back in 1648. Interestingly, she fought back against her accusers by taking them to court for slander and actually won her case. And there are cases like that throughout history.
And then there's Eunice Cole, famously known as Goody Cole, from Hampton, New Hampshire. She's a tragic case of a woman targeted repeatedly, having been accused of witchcraft at least 3 times between the 1650s and 1680s.
Her legacy took a fascinating turn centuries later. In 1938, to coincide with the town's 300th anniversary, the people of Hampton held Goody Cole Day. A crowd of 3,000 people attended a ceremony where they symbolically burned copies of her court records, mixed the ashes with soil, and buried them in an urn to publicly rehabilitate her image.
New Hampshire was also the site of one of early New England's most bizarre supernatural events, the stone-throwing devil, or Lithobolia. In 1682, George and Alice Walton ran a tavern on Great Island that was assaulted by flying stones for 4 straight months.
That case perfectly highlights how local grudges morphed into witchcraft fears. The Waltons had been locked in a bitter property dispute over an acre of land with their elderly neighbor, Hannah Jones, for over 20 years. When the stones started flying, they accused Hannah of using witchcraft to assault their tavern.
These stories from Maine and New Hampshire show us that the physical landscape of the frontier profoundly shaped the colonists' spiritual landscape. The wilderness was seen as enemy territory, inhabited by literal military adversaries and the devil himself. The fear was so intense that in Gloucester, Massachusetts, residents even reported phantom sightings of French and Native American soldiers alongside the witchcraft crisis in 1692.
All of these elements together sparked Salem's wildfire of accusations.